Hello, welcome in everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute here. In the meantime, if you'd like to throw in the chat where you're zooming in from today, that would be great. Looks like we got, oh, Alaska, nice. Hawaii, Bainbridge Island, nice. Bend, Oregon, let's go. Portland, yep. Oakland, Iowa, nice. Fort Worth, San Ramon, Sparks, Nevada, there you go. Arizona, awesome. California, great. And just as a caveat, we will have a lot of opportunities for students to be asking questions throughout the presentation and at the end. And I'll explain how that function works in just a second here. Awesome. I think the winner of furthest away goes to Alaska by for sure. We got Iowa in there. That's pretty. We got Texas is pretty good too. I like it. Okay, great. Awesome. All right. Great. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. I'll go ahead and get things started here. Just a quick introduction for the webinar. We will be presenting about the FAFSA and just some financial aid opportunities. Um, and we are joined by my financial aid colleagues as well as some of my colleagues in the admissions office. Um, but if you have questions while we're presenting, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We will not be using the chat for questions. The Q&A function is the way to go, and we can answer those directly to you, or we will answer them live at the end of the presentation. So feel free to throw those questions in throughout the entirety of the presentation. So my name is Wilda Klotz. I'm an admission counselor here, and I work with students in the state of Oregon. And I'll be helping co-run this webinar today with my friends in financial aid and some of my colleagues in the admissions office. I'm joined by Megan Baird, another admissions counselor, and Alexa Gasky, um, one of another admissions professionals in our office. And I will pass it off to our colleagues in financial aid to go ahead and share the presentation and introduce themselves.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. Sorry, was getting the presentation shared there. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here tonight. My name is Cole Fairburn. I work in the financial aid office. I'll let my colleague Shaylin introduce herself as well.
Yeah, my name is Shaylin Sapp. I'm was previously one of our financial aid counselors. I am now a tech analyst, so I have a lot of knowledge with meeting with students and families and helping them get all their financial aid questions answered.
Wonderful. Well, before we dive in, I just kind of want to do a brief introduction to what our office does. We work in an office that actually encompasses a few different departments. We are called Student Financial Services, and our office encompasses financial aid, student accounts, and student employment, and a number of other services that fall under that umbrella. And primarily my job and Shaylin's job is to make sure that students and families have access to financial aid opportunities from federal and state programs, as well as private and institutional sources like scholarships from Gonzaga, to help them understand the cost of attending the university, make arrangements to pay their bill, and have access to things like working on campus. Um, and I also want to dive in, before we get into the details of the FAFSA specifically, I want to take a moment to highlight our mission here in our office and our approach to assisting students and families within this process is something around the idea that we are committed to Gonzaga's mission specifically. And we hope to see this through our service and our policies whenever we interact with families. We really see our role in our office not only to assist families with resources for attending Gonzaga, but also to develop and educate students throughout our work. We see each opportunity that we have to interact with students as a learning opportunity, not just from today, but throughout your time, hopefully at Gonzaga. We understand that finances can be deeply personal, and we really get that. So if you don't get your questions answered today or a question comes up throughout the process, please don't hesitate to contact us and ask for help. We really do take a team approach in our office, and we're experienced, we're well staffed, and we're committed to excellent service. So if there's one thing beyond understanding how to file the FAFSA that you leave with today, it's an invitation, hopefully, to reach out and ask your questions. So taking a look a little bit at our agenda, we're going to dive into some specifics. That's why you're here. So we're going to look at the FAFSA specifically, who should apply, how to create and access your account when you are looking to apply, break down some things that are specific to like dependency questions on the FAFSA, and then applying for financial aid with the form itself. And really, again, dive into the specifics of what to expect when you get in there. And then, as my colleague Will mentioned, we're going to go into a Q&A, so please save your questions for then if you want to kind of get them read out loud, and we're excited for that. I'm going to turn it over to Shaylin.
Okay. So who can apply for the FAFSA? Most Gonzaga students will use the FAFSA to apply for financial aid. This webinar is mostly geared towards first-year students who are U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. Um, and so they would all use the FAFSA application. If that doesn't describe your citizenship status, just know that there are other ways to apply, and we will go into them, just not so much into detail with this webinar. And then there are ways to apply if you go to the admissions tab. It'll go over different routes that you will take if you are a non-citizen, specifically like an undocumented citizen. And then how to apply for scholarships and financial aid. We did have a webinar last fall that we have recorded and is available. It contains information on the types and sources of financial aid available at Gonzaga. So we'll cover the difference between grants, scholarships, loans, and student employment. And then we'll go into more detail about, we went into more detail about scholarship opportunities, different financial aid programs, and then the estimated cost of attendance at Gonzaga.
Perfect. Well, the FAFSA. It's a big word. It's kind of this big, scary thing. So let's dive in a little bit to what is it? So the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it is the form you'll need to fill out to receive financial aid from federal and state governments, as well as the institution in some ways to help pay for college. The FAFSA form is maintained by the U.S. Department of Education, and annually, over 17 million students will use the form to apply for financial aid. Here at Gonzaga, and usually at most schools, it's important that it's really the only financial aid application that we ask students to submit. And it's the gateway again to both federal and state aid, but also as well as some Gonzaga specific need-based aid. So really submitting the FAFSA is the most important thing you can do if you want financial aid. Um, to find the FAFSA, it's available online at fafsa.gov. So if you're researching how to submit a FAFSA, only submit it through the FAFSA.gov website or studentaid.gov portal, as there have been scams for non-affiliated organizations offering to help a family submit a FAFSA for like as low as $25. So if you see an ad like lowest amount to help file a FAFSA here, make sure to skip over that because, as I mentioned, in the name itself, it's the free application. And again, the FAFSA is an annual form, so you will need to submit a new FAFSA before each academic year that you want to receive aid. So in each year that you want to receive aid, you'll need to resubmit it. And if you plan to apply for aid throughout your time in college, just make sure that it's on your annual to-do list. Excitingly, the 2026 to 2027 form is available, and it will be based on your family's 2024 income. The FAFSA specifically generates what we would call a student aid index, or SAI. It's something you'll hear quite regularly. And this is a number that helps a school determine a student's level of financial need. It's not a dollar amount of aid a student will receive, nor is it a number that the student family is expected to pay for college. Rather, it's a number that helps us determine a student's relative financial need. So every student that files the FAFSA will receive an SAI. And again, it'll be a helpful indicator for us as the university or college to determine your financial aid when awarding your aid.
And who should apply? So many families who don't want to submit a FAFSA usually say that they won't do it because they don't think that they will qualify for financial aid. This is one of the biggest misconceptions that students and families have. While it is true that not everyone will qualify for additional aid, you should still apply for it if the cost is a factor at all. Um, as mentioned earlier, stuff like the Gonzaga grant, that's going to be geared towards the FAFSA. So you have to submit a FAFSA to qualify for that. Additionally, you have to submit a FAFSA to qualify for any federal, state financial aid. And then this would also be required for any loan opportunities, including the subsidized loan or the unsubsidized loan that is offered to all students regardless of need. On average, first-year students at Gonzaga receive 11,400 in need-based grants, and about 70% of students who submit a FAFSA receive need-based grants as part of their financial aid package. And then the median income of these families are about 140,000. That's going to be half of families receiving grants and had an income higher than 140,000. So grant eligibility is solely based on income, but this information is shared to you to give a sense of how generous certain aid programs can be. You should do a FAFSA. You should also do a FAFSA if you intend to borrow student loans and potentially for outside scholarships.
Perfect. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the FAFSA is available. The 2026-2027 FAFSA application is available at fafsa.gov, and it means that you can log in and begin completing it as soon as after this webinar. Not saying that you would do that on a Tuesday night, but it is certainly possible. And you might be wondering, how long will it take me? The good news is that for most people, it takes less than an hour to complete the FAFSA form, including the time spent gathering some necessary documentation. And what is that documentation? So here are some things that you might need to have ready as you get prepared to file. First, make sure that you have a FSA ID. This is your verified account username and password that you'll use to log in and sign the form electronically. I'll dive into that in a little bit more in a second as well. And if you're a dependent student or have a spouse that is contributing, you'll need their name, date of birth, social security number, and email address. For dependent students, that would be your parents' name. And their information as well. And then finally, you'll have your income and asset information handy. This could include tax returns, W-2s, or bank statements, depending on what's required. The FAFSA is very intuitive, so it will inform you what you'll need. And by preparing these ahead of time, you can streamline the process and hopefully get closer to getting that SAI, to making sure that your financial aid is kind of around the corner.
The FSA ID is your federal student aid ID. It's a combination of username and a password that will give you access to all U.S. Department of Education's online systems. This is the key to completing, signing, and managing the FAFSA form and handling your federal student aid account. So who needs an FSA ID? If you are a student, you'll need one and fill out electronically on your FAFSA. If you are a dependent student, you will have one of your parents create an FSA ID, and they will provide and sign their portion of your form. Each FSA ID is unique to the person creating it, so it's important that you do not share your information with anyone. Creating your FSA ID is pretty simple. You will go to either FAFSA.gov or studentaid.gov, and then you will provide your social security number, your date of birth, a valid email address, or a mobile phone number. For the email address, make sure that you are using one that you will still have access to after you've graduated high school. So many times people will use their high school email, use a different one because you will go back into there each year. During setup, you will verify your email or your phone number to ensure security. Be sure to use a strong, secure password and keep it somewhere safe. Once you have your FSA ID, that will be your go-to tool. So you use it to log into the FAFSA application, check the status of your financial aid, and even manage federal loans or grants in the future. It connects to tools like the IRS data retrieval tool, which will save you time by importing tax data directly to your FAFSA form. Having an active and verified FSA ID will ensure that you're ready to navigate every step of the financial aid process smoothly and securely. If you haven't created yours yet, you can do so now. You don't have to wait for the student to submit their portion of the FAFSA for parents to get theirs going right now. So you can do either one right away.
All right, FAFSA dependency. We've mentioned this a few times already, and you might be wondering, am I a dependent student or not? Well, let's find out. So now that we've covered the importance of the FSA ID and how to set it up, dependency status is a critical part of the FAFSA process because it determines whose financial aid information or financial information must be reported on the application. Dependent students are required to include their parents' information, while independent students report only their own, and if applicable, their spouse's details as well. Most students, if you're wondering, are considered dependent unless they meet specific criteria, such as being born before January 1st, 2003, being married, as I already mentioned, or pursuing graduate studies. There's a few other examples as well. But I would recommend visiting the studentaid.gov website just to get a little deeper dive on some of the scenarios if you are wondering whether or not you're an independent or dependent student. For example, other qualifying factors include being a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces, having children or dependents of your own, or having experienced unique circumstances like being orphaned, in foster care, or being an emancipated minor, or at risk of homelessness after July 1st of 2025. And it's important to know that understanding dependency status is essential for accurately completing the FAFSA and really knowing what information to provide when you are getting it done.
And then, which parent is a contributor? Most traditionally aged college students are required to have at least one parent's information on the form. But which parent will be the contributor that you will ask? So, for FAFSA purposes, a parent is going to be the student's legal, which is biological or adoptive parent, or a person that the state has determined to be the student's legal parent. Um, a step parent would be considered a parent if they have adopted the student. Step parents that have not adopted a student are identified as a parent's spouse. So if the student's biological or adoptive parents are married to each other, both information, so if each parent will be on the form. If the parent's marital status is married, both parents would be included on the FAFSA, but if the parents file jointly, only one parent has to be a contributor. That's because at that point, the contributor would include the other parent when they sign that consent. And then if the parents file taxes separately, both parents would have to be considered as contributors. So both parents would have to have FSA IDs and then submit their consent that way. And then the other potential scenario would be that if the student lives with a bio or adoptive parent and they reside together, but they are not married, both parents would still be counted as contributors. The difference is if the parent is living with like a boyfriend, like the mom is living with a boyfriend, but not necessarily the student's parent. You would not have to count mom's boyfriend. If they are both your biological parents or your legal parents, then you would include them as contributors. This doesn't matter if they are divorced or separated. If they live together, you would still include them. If the student's parents are not married and they do not live together, you're going to choose the parent who provides the most financial support over the past 12 months. So if parents provide an even amount of support, then you would use the parent that has the greatest income or assets on the FAFSA form. And then again, if that parent is remarried, the step parent would be required to be on the form. And if the parent and step parent did not file taxes jointly, same scenario, both parents would have to have FSA IDs to provide consent. And then if the parent is not remarried, you don't have to count them as a contributor, like I said. So if it's like mom's boyfriend or something like that, you do not have to count them as a contributor. It's only when they become legally married.
All right, so you've gotten your FSA ID and you know whose information you're going to need when you start the FAFSA. So let's dive into starting the FAFSA actually. The first step would be, again, to go to FAFSA.gov, where you'll begin the process. And then once you're on the site, you'll want to click on Start a New Form. You'll need to log in again using your FSA ID, the one you hopefully have already created. And this will ensure that your information is secure and allows you to access all the next necessary sections of the form. Just a quick tip that it's a good idea for a student to start the FAFSA form and complete their section first prior to the parent starting theirs. This will save time and help prevent errors, especially when it comes to personal details and dependency status. For example, once the student section is done, the parent can then log in and complete their part as necessary. And by starting with the student section, you ensure that everything is filled out in the correct order, making hopefully the process smoother for everyone involved. And then the parent can get theirs done, sign it, and once that's done, you're off and running.
And you will want to complete the 26 to 2027 FAFSA form. There will likely be two FAFSAs available when you complete your FAFSA. It'll be the 2025 to 2026 FAFSA, which is meant for current students who are currently attending a school. And the 2026 to 2027 FAFSA will be for next year. If you submit the wrong FAFSA, that is okay. Just go back and fill out the correct FAFSA form. When you're ready, you will continue to the next step, which would be selecting the appropriate role, so parent or student. If you are the student completing the form, make sure that you select student, and then it will take you to the selections where you will provide your personal information and answer questions about your financial situation. And then if you are a parent completing your section, select parent, and then it'll allow the parent to enter necessary details about income and financial information. This will all determine financial aid eligibility. It is important that each person is managing their own sections of the form. It might seem easier to share your student aid.gov accounts or your FSA IDs, but it is strongly discouraged. Beyond the ethical issues, like claiming to be someone you are not, the form's directions are tailored to the role that you are logged in as. Whether that's a student, parent, spouse, this could create confusion if you're in the wrong person completing the wrong section. So it's a mistake that we can easily avoid just by having one person have their FSA ID and fill out their own form. By ensuring the right person is filling out the right sections, you'll prevent errors and keep the process as smooth as possible. As well as a student could be accepting loan offers, so it's important that the student is the one who's aware of that because it will be in the student's name.
All right. Now let's go over the dependent student section of the FAFSA form. First, you'll begin by entering your identity information. And these are things like basic details such as your name, date of birth, and social security number. And after that, you'll need to provide consent for the U.S. Department of Education to use your information for processing your financial aid. That consent part of it is pretty important, so make sure you do that. And then next, you'll move to the personal circumstances section, where you'll answer a few questions that help determine your dependency status. And it's awesome because the FAFSA form is intuitive for the questions. So based on certain answers to questions, it will either lock a question out and direct you in the correct route, which is really nice. And so a reminder on the dependency questions. These are questions that are important because they tell the form whether you're considered a dependent or an independent student, which influences whose financial information is required later on in the process. Uh, in this process, you will also be asked to provide your financial information, such as your income, your assets, and other details related to your financial situation. Don't worry, it's not uncommon for students to not have a lot to report here, but in many cases, again, you will be asked to provide some information. And this is where it's important to accurately represent your tax filing status, and it's going to be based on your 2024 or 2024 tax filing. So if you filed taxes in 2024 or not, make sure to enter that information accurately. So if you didn't file taxes, you'll just need to select the appropriate selection that you didn't file taxes. And mistakes here can cause delays or lead to follow-up requests from schools. So if there's information that might be a little off, you'll be hearing from us and we'll make sure to kind of straighten it out. And then after all dependent sections are completed, you'll reach the e-signature page where you'll electronically sign the FAFSA. And this page will also allow you to invite your parents to sign their part of the form. And believe it or not, we get a lot of FAFSAs that come in incomplete just because they haven't been signed. So we'll get kind of an error message on our end, and we'll have to reach back out and say, hey, log back in and make sure that you sign the form. So something as simple as that, make sure you get to the kind of the end of the process there.
For one of the dependency status questions, there's an option where a student can apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only. This option is available for dependent students who indicate that their parents are unwilling to provide financial information. Sometimes that is meant to be selected, but sometimes students have accidentally selected that. So it's important to understand the consequences of selecting this option. If a dependent student selects just this option, then that means that they are waiving any other types of financial aid eligibility. This can include the Gonzaga grant, Pell Grant, federal work study, and then the direct subsidized loan. None of that can be calculated. These are all forms that are available only if the parent is included on your FAFSA and the parent consents. If you've accidentally selected this option and you meant to provide your parent information, what you will do is you will go back to the questions about applying for the direct unsubsidized loan and change your answer. After that, you will be prompted to invite your parents to complete their section of the FAFSA and submit consent. By ensuring the section is answered correctly, you can maintain eligibility for all need-based aid that can make a significant difference for financial support that you receive.
All right. I know this is that parents out there have been holding their breath. This is the moment you've been waiting for. Let's go over the steps that parents need to take when they are completing the FAFSA. And just a quick reminder, parents need to create their own account at FAFSA.gov. So you'll get your own FSA ID if you haven't already done so. And then once the parent has their own account, they should gather the necessary documents, again, including personal information like social security number, tax information, and any other financial records that will be needed to complete the FAFSA. Um, the student will then invite the parent to the form, hopefully already completing their portion of it. And then once the parent receives the invitation, they will start the FAFSA by clicking the link provided by the student. If the parent is starting the form from scratch, they will begin by completing the student personal circumstances section, which is where they'll confirm their relationship to the student and answer any questions that help define the dependency status of the student. So while it's not necessarily recommended, it is certainly possible if a parent wants to go ahead and get started, and they can do so. And then it will help determine the dependency status of their student. And then next, the parent will need to provide consent and approval for the form to proceed. This ensures that their financial information can be used to calculate the student's financial aid eligibility. And then there's some more steps as well.
So after those initial steps, you will then complete the parent demographics section. This section asks for personal details like the parent's name, date of birth, and contact information. And then the parents will move to the parent financial section, and that's where they will provide their financial information, which will include income and asset details. This is crucial in determining students' financial aid eligibility, so be sure that you have your most recent tax return documents and other relevant documentation on hand during this part. Once the financials are entered, the parent will need to sign the FAFSA form electronically. This is the last step for the parent to complete their section of their student's FAFSA.
And then wham bam, the parent will receive a confirmation page upon submitting the student's FAFSA form. This page displays the information about tracking the student's FAFSA and next steps. Then the student will also receive an email with the full detailed confirmation. When you submit a FAFSA, you also will get some information about your SAI, some again possible information that will be sent then to the school. So while it might not be the official, because it takes some processing time, you're going to get a report back that says this is kind of what we gathered and what to expect with next steps. But congratulations, then you made it through the process and you'll be waiting to hear back from us.
And then other aid applications. So this is going to be geared towards undocumented students. So much of what we discussed about this FAFSA is for FAFSA eligible students. So it's any US citizens or eligible non-citizens. But there are some options for undocumented students. Every student, no matter their citizenship status, is automatically considered for merit scholarships, so your hard work is recognized. We also encourage students to explore outside scholarships and Gonzaga has an outside scholarship database that any and all students are welcome to look into. But if you are an undocumented student or have other kinds of immigration status that does not qualify you as an eligible non-citizen, there are a few different applications that you can submit. The first one that we'll talk about is the Washington State residence. So the WASFA is the Washington application for state financial aid. It's for students who are ineligible for federal aid due to immigration status or undocumented. And so that would be for any Washington aid, and you have to be a Washington resident. You can start your application on the link that is listed, and then the deadlines are the same as the FAFSA. Again, this is only if you are unable to submit a FAFSA. And then the needs analysis form are for non-residents of Washington that do not live in Washington. So this is an example like if a student lives in Arizona, but they still want to attend Gonzaga. The needs analysis form is on our financial aid website, and then that student will submit it so that they can be considered for additional need-based Gonzaga financial aid. You can email the form to finaid@gonzaga.edu, and then we will process your financial aid application from there. Like I said, these are all for undocumented students, so if you are ineligible to submit a FAFSA, but you live in the United States, you can submit a WASFA or a needs analysis. But if you are a US citizen and, for example, you live in Washington, just submit the FAFSA, do not submit a WASFA. It's one or the other, because the FAFSA will take into consideration any state eligibility.
All right. I'm sure many of you are eager to get this process started and to kind of know what to expect with regards to the timeline. So first, you'll want to get prepared by starting your common application or transfer application and submitting that by the appropriate deadlines, well, whether that be early admit or if you're going regular decision. Either way, get prepared and start working on those admissions applications. And then next, get your documents organized and ready to go to apply for financial aid using the FAFSA or WASFA and making sure that you are getting that to us so that once you get admitted, we can communicate your complete financial aid package down the road. And then once your GU application and FAFSA have been successfully submitted, you will hear back from our admissions office with your admissions decision. And if you applied early action, you can expect a decision by the end of December. Exciting. We're getting so close. And then if you're applying regular decision, you will likely hear by early March. And if you are admitted, you will then receive your financial aid offer. And we hope to have aid offers out to students by the end of February. And I'll give a little secret that we're working on a new way to communicate those financial aid offers, and it's going to look great and be really smooth. So hopefully that's something to look forward to. And this is a time that you really want to sit down and plan with your parents or guardians on how you will decide if Gonzaga is the right fit for you, both financially and overall. And your final step will be to confirm your admission with us and celebrate the fact that you will be a ZAG, which is so exciting.
Okay, so one very common question that we have revolves around special conditions or special circumstances. So, a question some people have is how does the school take into account a drastic reduction of income from 2024 to the current year in 2025? The FAFSA will require you to submit your 2024 tax information, whether or not there has been a reduction of income. So we do understand that that may not be reflective of current circumstances, but we need that in place in order to move forward in a process that we call as the Special Conditions Appeal or Financial Aid Appeal. This will allow us to take into consideration a different year to have it more accurately reflect circumstances. And then there are other common questions or requests that are associated to appeals. So go to the website under the financial aid tab in my GU where you can look at all the different options for appealing. Please note that we will not start processing appeals until mid-March, so we ask that students will wait to receive their financial aid offer before appealing. And then the first step to appealing is submitting a FAFSA, a WASFA, a needs analysis application, and then if an appeal is submitted but there is no FAFSA or WASFA on file, it would be canceled because if there's no FAFSA to correct or an income point to start at, we wouldn't be able to move forward. So we understand that that tax year might not be relative to current year, but we do need it on file in order to move forward. Once you've done that, you can contact our office about next steps. But like I said, we usually will start processing after the student has received their award offer. And then for international students, I would have you connect with your international admissions counselor because international students would not complete a needs analysis form because that is for out of state students but still living in the US due to documentation status. International students are not qualified for the undocumented status. Another question we get is how will our family share if there are multiple siblings in college with the new FAFSA? Will Gonzaga consider this? Yes, we will consider it for Gonzaga aid. We would not be able to change anything on the FAFSA because that is no longer considered. But for Gonzaga aid, yes. Like I said, the first step is to submit a FAFSA, and then we will process mid-March. And for any of the appealable reasons, just wait until you've received your award offer, your initial offer, and then we will start working on appeals after that.
All right. Well, we've mentioned a few different times on this what information to gather as you're completing the FAFSA, what kind of financial information is required. So an important question that you may ask yourself as you get through the process is what assets am I required to report? And this is a pretty important one. So some things that you are required to report when you're submitting the FAFSA are things like the annual amount of child support received, net worth of businesses that you or your family own. And this is kind of a new change, but net worth of a farm, including the fair market value of land, buildings, livestock, unharvested crops, and machinery that is actively used in investment farms or agriculture or commercial activities, minus any debts held against those assets. That is a mouthful and probably a lot to remember with regards to that specific thing. So certainly if you have a farm, please reach out to us and we can kind of dive into that a little bit deeper with you. Um, Also, along with the farm, if you have a home on the farm that is your primary residence, you would not include that in the principal value of that home. Um, and then an educated or education savings accounts designated for the student, like 529 accounts. And we'll dive in a little bit deeper into that. Some things that you wouldn't include as an asset are, again, the value of a primary residence, and then any retirement accounts. And again, these are a lot of specifics. So as you dive deeper into filing the FAFSA, we would definitely encourage you to reach out to our office and we can kind of sit down and have a conversation on file this or don't include this. And Shaylin mentioned this as well. When it comes to things like appeals, this is kind of where we can kind of gather that information as well. If you have made a mistake, we can kind of talk through that, make some adjustments, and hopefully see where that makes a difference.
So for 529 accounts, how are those reported? The 529 accounts will be considered on the parent's assets only for the account of the designated student. So if you have multiple students and each student has a 529 account, the parent will only report the 529 account associated to that student. An example is if I have a twin sister, and if we are both submitting our FAFSAs, when our parents are submitting their portions of each FAFSA, they will submit their 529 assets to that student. So my mom will submit her 520, or excuse me, on her assets, she will list my 529 account on my FAFSA, but she will not include my sister's. And then when my sister submits her FAFSA, um, my mom will then submit the 529 assets on the parent's account on her FAFSA. So you will usually only have one 529 account associated to the one student. You will never have multiple for multiple students on your FAFSA.
All right. There is a question on the FAFSA that is used to determine whether or not a family has to report assets. And this is the means tested federal benefits program question. So specifically, if you've qualified for any of these programs within the last year, you do not have to report assets. And those specific programs are Medicaid, including the Children's Health Insurance Program or Supplemental Security Income (SSI), Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or SNAP benefits, also known as food stamps, the Free and Reduced Price School Lunch Program, temporary assistance for needy families, and that may use a different name in different states. So, again, reach out with any questions along that. And also the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. And a person need not have received the benefit for an entire year, just if you've received the benefit within the last year. And again, questions are never too late to ask. So please reach out if that's a little convoluted and we can kind of take a deeper dive into that. And with that, that really kind of wraps up in this deep dive of the FAFSA. So I'll turn it back to Will to, I think, get a little bit of a Q&A started. Let me stop sharing my screen here.
Thank you so much, Cole, and thanks, Shaylin, for sharing about the FAFSA and going through that today. We'll go ahead and shoot at you some questions from the Q&A here. So I'll just start off right away. We have a question coming in about if parents were divorced after 24 taxes were filed, and so would that use not be using the right amounts on income?
Yeah, so for that scenario, that would be a great case to submit a special conditions appeal. Um, because parents would have submitted their taxes jointly, there's no way to separate the parents' income on the FAFSA, but on a special conditions appeal, we would be able to subtract the divorced parents' income. So if that happens to you, submit an appeal and then we'll take it from there.
Great. And another question, are asset details accurate as of now or as of 2024?
with regards to that list, that is as of now. Again, there can always be changes that are adaptive, but if you have any questions with regards to assets, I would always advise you to reach out to whether it's our office or another financial aid office. We can take a deep dive on whether or not something should be included, but that is recent and current.
Great. Thanks, Cole. And we just have a question coming in about if you could just please repeat what you said regarding choosing to not apply for need-based aid. It was a little while ago in the presentation, but just having that option of choosing.
Yeah, I think this was regarding the unsubsidized loan only option. So that is an option that a student can submit if they only want to receive the unsubsidized loan. So that would bypass any financial questions to the parent. It would bypass consent from the parent. So that is in terms of only if a student submits a FAFSA and they still want to borrow loans, but the parent is unwilling to. If you are wanting like merit aid, so like the scholarships, something like that, technically you don't have to submit a FAFSA at Gonzaga. Other schools might require you to submit a FAFSA for merit aid. So check with the schools, but at Gonzaga, it is based off of the application. So you would not have to submit a FAFSA if you are looking for like merit aid, that kind of thing. But we do still recommend submitting it because you never know, and it makes it easier for families to get in touch with us.
And Shaylin, just to add one more thing, we kind of touched on this. There are things what we call dependency overrides. Again, it's very specific on certain circumstances that a student is going through. So if that is something that you feel you do qualify for, um, again, I would go ahead and file the FAFSA with as much information as you have at your disposal. And then when you get your financial aid award, reach out to the financial aid office and talk about a dependency override. It can vary. It's a very specific, again, case-oriented thing.
Great. Yes. And then we have a question coming in about if parents are married and filed jointly, and either parent can be the contributor and just choosing if it's better or not to choose which income of given parent.
So great question. It does not matter which parent is the contributor. Essentially, they've made it really simple so far. For most families, what will happen is you will, again, one parent will be the contributor, and then it will automatically pull that tax information from the IRS, which will show again that this parents file jointly. It will show their complete gross income. And then it doesn't matter which parent has become the contributor. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the simple answer. Shaylin, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I would say the same thing.
Great. And then we just have another question coming in about just could you talk a little bit about 2024 wages and assets and where that would be filled out on the FAFSA?
So that will be pretty early on. It's where you sign consent. It will be the portion where you consent to having taxes automatically drawn from the IRS. Um, it may or may not have set the specific year, but each year it's going to be based off of the year before. So right now, any FAFSAs that are submitted, we have to go back to the most recent completed tax year. So we would do 2024. Even if you submit the FAFSA next year, like say in January or February, you would still use 2024 taxes to make it equal for all students and circumstances. So it may or may not have specifically said 2024, but when you do the data retrieval, that's when it will take out 2024 taxes.
And Shaylin mentioned this, but just another pointer out there that the 25-26 is available. And it's not a huge deal if you end up submitting that one. We would just need you to go ahead and log back in and submit a 26-27. But believe it or not, it's actually a pretty common error. And when you're a financial aid administrator, sometimes there's a point in time when there's years available. So it can be confusing, and we know that.
Yep. If you want to have fun, just fill them all out, you know?
Why not?
Uh, why not? The another question, does applying for the FAFSA early give you a larger amount of aid?
So, great question. At Gonzaga, we don't have a priority deadline per se when it comes to filing the FAFSA. That would increase your chances of getting more aid. With that being said, that is not necessarily the case at each institution. So our general consensus is that the earliest you can submit a FAFSA, the you should because that will kind of one clear the way for any kind of potential missteps. So if you do have to refile, you get that out of the way and you can communicate that with the school. Two, again, if the institution does award based on kind of timing and pools of money that is available, that is a good way to get access to that money or scholarships or grants. And then also, again, with regards to if you kind of know that you might have to appeal based on a situation that was already brought up where there's been a divorce post 2024, it's important to file early and then kind of get that information available so that when the appeal happens, you have that ready to go.
Great. And can families amend the FAFSA if already submitted?
Yeah, they should be able to. There is like a waiting time for it to be submitted and complete, but once you have it fully submitted, you have that green light to go and make adjustments. If you can't make adjustments on some questions, reach out to the office of the school that you want to attend, and they can make changes. Sometimes, if there are questions like your birthday or your social security number, those are questions that the student has to go in and make adjustments. But in terms of like income-based stuff like that, the schools can help, but the students will then be able to make adjustments as well.
Great. Yeah. And this is a more specific question, but if a grandparent has set up a college fund, how does that get applied to the FAFSA?
That is a really good question. So it's only the contributors. So like the parent, their like for example, 529, the parents would be counted as an asset. The grandparents fund is not considered an asset on the FAFSA.
Great. Another question, if someone owns their home and has a traditional 401k but no other investments, is there any net value to declare?
No, if it's just your home and it's just retirement, I would declare zero. Um, if any of your retirements accounts are not technically retirements, check with the financial aid office to see how you should report it. But if they're pretty straightforward 401k, then no.
Great. And do families need to report their liabilities on the FAFSA or just assets? For example, reporting a mortgage account, tuition for a high school, etc.
No, it would just be the assets. Again, with regards to a mortgage, is if as long as that mortgage is like your primary residency and you're not again renting out a unit that they pay you and you pay the mortgage where you get into those kind of cases that would again be considered an asset essentially. If it's your primary residency, you would not report a liability in that case.
That does kind of bring up the option of submitting a special conditions appeal. One of the options that we have at Gonzaga is if you are paying for additional tuition, either for a sibling in college or K through 12 private education. So if that is something that your family is paying, submit a special conditions appeal and we can take that into consideration internally for Gonzaga aid, but not for the FAFSA itself.
Great. Another question coming in about just a family may have added an account, a 529 account for the wrong person. Is this something that is correctable on the FAFSA?
Yeah, same place that you will go to make any corrections, it would be the parent that would go into their account and they would make the correction.
Great. Yeah. Um, just a larger question. Will the government shutdown affect FAFSA processing?
It is not, no. Again, we get communications quite regularly from the Department of Ed informing us on any kind of changes. To date, there has been no delays with submissions. This does bring up a good idea. I think Shailene kind of mentioned this. It does take, and this is for regular processes, a couple, 2 to 3 days for us to receive a FAFSA, for it to get processed on the back end and then get communicated with us. So we would ask kind of for that buffer time. You know, if you just submit it and reach out, it's likely that we don't have it. So give us, maybe I would say, just to be safe, give us a week, and then once that week has passed, reach out and we can confirm whether or not we received it.
Yes. Is inherited money included in the FAFSA?
Yes, it does. But if there are any circumstances as to where those funds are going, or if they're used towards um, any payments, like after a family member has passed to go towards funeral costs, etc., any of those can go into consideration with the appeal, um, and then we can reduce it that way. But if they are part of your savings, then yes, you would have to count it.
Great. And then a question just kind of getting at this, does the student always initiate the FAFSA process?
Again, it is not required. A parent can go in, make their FSA ID, and then start the process. And what that essentially will do is will help determine the dependency status of the student. And then the student can log in and complete their portion of it. Uh, we only kind of recommend that the students start it so that it gets their questions answered correctly and then it gets it over to the parent. So it's kind of like a process that we would prefer, recommend, but it's not a requirement.
Great. And for our California students that get free school lunch, if they have marked that their student gets free lunch on the FAFSA and the FAFSA did not ask for any income documentation, is that the correct choice?
So, um, it will have asked for income. So you would have signed consent to get income tax transferred over. But for assets, it would have bypassed all of those questions. That is a part of the means.
Tested.
Um, yes,
Yeah,
excuse
me.
me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're
Yes.
good. Yeah.
Great. And I'm assuming this is talking about our February 1st deadline, but if you apply a regular decision, what would be the timeline on getting your financial aid package?
I know, so I mean, typically by early March, or late March or mid to late March would be kind of the ideal. Like I mentioned, we are kind of getting into a process that is on the financial aid side, streamlining our ability to get those award packages out a little bit faster. So our hope would be that it would be very close to your admissions decision timeline as well. So as we get closer to that, I would reach out and say, when's the expectation? But our idea would be, again, within a couple weeks of that admissions decision.
Awesome. And this is a super general question, but could you just go over real quick how the process of actually submitting the FAFSA to Gonzaga works?
Yeah, Shaylin, do you wanna?
Yes. So when you are submitting your FAFSA as the student, after you submit your consent and your demographics, it will give you a page that will say select your schools. It will have you prompt the state, the city, and then which college you want it to go to. And you can submit up to 20 schools at a time. Once you have all of the schools selected, you'll go to the next page and it'll give you a history of the schools that you selected. If you need more than 20 schools to receive a FAFSA, wait until it's been submitted, reach out to the school and verify that the FAFSA has been received, and then you could go back and delete some of the options and add more schools. 20 seems like quite a lot, so that's not very common, but some students do reach out, and then once we have it, they can take the school off and add more.
Great. And just following up on the California question about the free lunches, just confirming that they are supposed to mark that they are getting free lunches. So no assets will be listed on the FAFSA.
Yeah, as long as somebody in the current household within the past year has received those benefits, it would bypass the assets questions.
Great. Thank you. And that looks like we have wrapped up our questions from the chat. Thank you all for coming today. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to our financial aid office. You can also sign up for those appointments with our financial aid counselors. And for any admissions questions, please reach out to your assigned admission counselor. Thank you all for coming, and this recording will also be available at our website for you to reference in the future. But please reach out to the financial aid office or your admissions counselor with any further questions. Thank you all for coming tonight, and have a great night. Thank you.